that. And I will share my screen.
Is there a way to have, will we have questions that are audio or going to be written?
Probably both. Most of the time in our sessions, they tend to be audio.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's get started. We are recording now. And let's get to my PowerPoint. All right, so hopefully everyone is seeing my PowerPoint. And
Yes.
so we want to welcome everyone to Environmental Fridays. It is personal. This is season 5. This is episode 10. If you wish to see the entire lineup for the academic year, both season 5 and season 6, both fall 2023 and spring 2024, you can go down here to this link, or you can use the QR code on the right. Also, let me just get these people in here. Also, one of the things that I've been trying for us to think about is this picture, this photo. It's a very iconic photo. It has a name, it's called Earthrise. It's a photo taken by Apollo 8 astronaut. And in the foreground, what you see there is the surface of the moon, and that blue planet, that's home. That's our home. And this photo has been instrumental in starting and triggering several environmental movements around the globe, including Earth Day. If you want to listen to an interview of the astronaut that took this photo, again, the QR code here,
Hey, Bobby.
or just use,
Yeah.
we need,
Let me apologize first. I feel like I'll keep coming at you negative.
we just need everybody to mute, okay? So you can look at that interview of that astronaut here on YouTube. At this point, I want to introduce my co-host, Her Excellency Yolande Yvonne Smith. She has held several positions in, I guess you'll call it foreign affairs, foreign service. Currently, she's advisor and coordinator in the OAS to the Secretary, Assistant Secretary General. She is a recent published author of the book Reflections, Stories for Inspiration, which you can get on Amazon. And you could see she's been former ambassador of Grenada to the United States, permanent representative of Grenada to OAS, non-resident high commissioner to Canada, and former chair of 2 important councils associated with the OAS. So you will be hearing from her soon when she introduces Mark, who I believe is a friend of hers. Before we hear from Mark and we hear from Yolande, we have a special feature. A friend of mine, Catherine Codell, she's the program director for the Department of Sustainable Agriculture. So there is some overlap here between the idea of sustainability for both of our speakers today. So she's the program director for our Department of Sustainable Agriculture here at Andrews University. And I think in her special feature today, she will talk to us about something recent and exciting that her department just recently got certified with the Michigan Agriculture Environmental Assurance Program. So Kathy, I'm going to stop sharing and the next 5 minutes or so is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Murray. I appreciate that, the opportunity to share a bit of what's been happening here at Andrews University, an environmental initiative that involves our department. Before I jump into that, I'd like to give a brief timeline to some of those of you who may not know much about our university, let alone our department. Our school began almost 150 years ago as Battle Creek College. And in 1901, it moved to Berrien Springs, Michigan, where it was renamed Emmanuel Missionary College. And then in 1959, the Theological Seminary joined and it became Andrews University. The reason it was moved to Berrien Springs was because the excellent farms, gardens, orchards that were there at the time. They started a dairy soon afterwards, and those two entities together allowed students to work in them and pay off a significant amount of their tuition. The academics was not far behind, and during World War I, the Department of Agriculture began offering classes and graduated their first students in 1918. Jumping ahead almost 100 years, in 2015, the department's name was changed to the Department of Sustainable Agriculture, and in 2018, the dairy was closed. We realized that after 100 plus years and lots of changes in the industry, really needed to up their name to better reflect our philosophy in our department and also what we're actually teaching our students. This is shown in our motto, educating Earth's caretakers. And so the name changed to Sustainable Agriculture. When the dairy closed after 111 years, we were able to repurpose a number of the facilities there into an agriculture education center, which began in 2019. Currently, we have a number of livestock species there: goats, chickens, rabbits, miniature pigs, some calves, and a few cows. We practice rotational grazing of the livestock, as well as pasture, free-range pasture for the chickens. We raise our own hay and that we feed to our livestock, and this recycles the nutrients back on the farm. Because of these environmentally friendly practices, we wanted to find a way to get an external verification of them. There's some sort of certification program. So we looked around and we discovered the Michigan Agriculture Environmental Assurance Program. This is a voluntary certification process run by operated out of the Michigan Department of Agricultural and Rural Development. Their logo has a number of features that represent what this program is about, including fresh air, clean water, good stewardship and protection of the environment. The program has 4 systems that can be certified: farmstead system, cropping, livestock, and forest, wetlands, and habitat system. And within each system, there's 3 phases. The first phase is education of the landowner or the operator. Then the second phase is on-farm assessment, and the third phase would be third-party verification of the process. We chose to focus on the livestock system at this point for the Agriculture Education Center. The livestock system basically deals with manure management, how the manure is handled, how it's transported and spread on the fields, how it's stored. Is there any potential for runoff and contamination of surface water? We're right near the St. Joe River, for example, our well water. Is there any air pollution potential from the odor from the manure? So these things are all evaluated in the certification process. So we wanted to start it earlier than we did, but as you know, in March 2020, a pandemic intervened and kind of put everything on hold. So it wasn't until this year we were able to resume the process. So in July, we submitted our application to be certified for the livestock system and had our initial farm visit. Then over the next weeks and months, the online education classes were taken, basically dealing with those very issues about manure management, odor control, and protection of air and water. We also collected 12 soil samples from our various pastures and hay fields. And then in October of 23, we had our final verification visit. And we're so delighted that on October 11, we were able to join the more than 6,300 farms in Michigan that have had MEEP certification. And we will be, every 5 years, we will be revisited to see if our certification is still in place. Are there any questions?
All right. So any questions for Kathy? And we could come back at the end as well if you don't have any
I
questions.
have to step away
But how many students?
class,
How
so,
many students do you have now? What's your faculty like and students?
right. We have 28 students. We're down a bit from where we've been in the past. I think the students are a little pandemic hesitant, right, to jump back in. But we had quite a large new class this fall. About half, actually, the department was new. So we're very optimistic that it's growing in the future. So we started a tough time with the pandemic, but with this initiative, but we see it taking off in the future.
Yeah, and I know for a fact that many of your graduates from your program have gone to really well-known schools in Europe, London, Cornell, and other places of high repute. Is that
Right. Yeah, the animal science. Yeah, I'm the animal science program director as well as the chair of the department. And of the students that apply to vet school that we have that are qualified, right now we're running about 89% acceptance rate. So we're pretty pleased with that. And they're doing well in veterinary school too. But a number of them also have other animal related careers, either in animal production or involving the recreational industry with animals, such as summer camps, running or in zoos, this type of thing.
all right? Very good. Thank you so very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we'll move along and we will, let me see if I could share my screen again. And we will now move on to, is everybody seen my screen again here? Ambassador Yolande, this is your turn to introduce your friend.
My friend and colleague, and thank you so much, Desmond. And for me, it's a privilege to be back with Environmental Fridays. I've done a
Yes.
session before. I always try to listen behind the scenes when I can. And I know we've had some really, really good presentations before. But I just want to introduce the man behind the smile. Did you see that big smile right
I
there?
know,
Just
right?
plastered on the screen? Mark Lambrides, he is the director of the Department of Sustainable Development here at the OAS. And in that capacity, he has leadership over the he has direction over the OS-led initiatives that contribute to improved environmental management and practices, and those include sectors of water, biodiversity, climate change, natural hazards, and sustainable energy throughout Latin America and the Caribbean. And for those of you who don't know, the OAS is made up of 34 member states within Latin America and the Caribbean. So he has oversight over all that. And prior to returning to the OAS, and I'll come back to that, Mark has worked at the Nature Conservancy, where he served as Director, Low Carbon Future. And before that, he was a Senior Energy Specialist at the World Bank. So I said before coming back. So in his past life, he was at the OAS for 15 years, and he was the section chief for energy here at the OAS. He received his MBA in International Relations with concentrations in International Economics and Latin American Studies from Johns Hopkins University, the Paul H. Nitze School of Advanced International Studies, and he received his BA in Political Science and Spanish with concentration in International Business from Kalamazoo College. I am very pleased to introduce to you Mark Lambrides, and he and I worked together when I chaired the Council for Integral Development at the OAS on a number of projects, especially in 2022. we had a series that we were dealing with AI and youth involvement in sustainability and the entire gambit. So I am thrilled that he's going to be able to present today. And for those of you who are going to look at it later on, make sure you pay attention because the OAS is doing a lot in the sustainable development field right now. And we know that's a hot topic, and we're pleased to have Mark. So Mark, the floor is yours.
Thank you, thank you. And I have to say too, Mark, you're, at least it seems like you are from our Southwest Michigan area. Is that correct? You went to college at Kalamazoo, which is about 45 minutes away from here for us here.
Yeah, that's true. I did go to Kalamazoo College, and I'll talk a little bit about my experience there and connect it to my career for the purposes of this conversation today. It's a real privilege. Real quickly, let me stop the share for a second. Let me make sure we get this up as a share. 1 second here. Sorry, are you seeing a share?
Not yet. It was, okay, it's coming up now. Yeah, it's coming up.
I'm seeing a Zoom screen though
Zoom
there.
screen.
Let me stop and start that over.
Yeah,
Come on.
it was up, but.
Not having access to share it. Hold on 1 second. Must have closed the file.
Let's see.
And of course, while Mark is doing that, I want to congratulate you, Dr. Murray, on how far this Environmental Fridays have come.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, we
and
keep
just the
trying.
level of participation you've had over the past couple of years as well. Very diverse. Very diverse.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's true. But we keep trying to get more people on the live end of it.
I think sometimes just the timing, because I know I've had to listen sort of behind the scenes or come back to it. So
right.
I know it's the same for most people, but it doesn't take away from the value that we're adding at all to the conversation. Mark, I think you're ready.
Mark is
Yes, thank you. Sorry about that. Somehow my PowerPoint screen, you're seeing it now?
Yes, we are.
Perfect. Okay. All right, let's jump right in. And Ambassador Smith, thank you so much for that introduction. It's great to see you again, if only virtually this time, but I look forward to talking with you in person shortly. It's a real privilege to be with everyone here today and to share some of my insights into this critical space of sustainable development, a little bit about how I got here, a little bit about what we're trying to do at the OES, and think through with our audience about how we tackle some of the most important challenges in the space of sustainable development and environment for the future that you all as students, high school and college age and young people will have to face in your future. And some of the things that are happening in this world of sustainable development as you make important education and career choices going forward. So as the introduction suggested, I am the director for the Department of Sustainable Development within the Organization of American States. I want to talk real briefly about, and none of this is in my slides, but I want to talk a little bit about my career development, how I got here, just so you can think about career paths and things of interest, and if you want to pursue the similar pathway, some of the steps I took to get where I am here. And I did want to just briefly mention one of the key elements that has really made me successful in this space is the ability to speak more than one language. When I was in high school, and I graduated from a high school in Michigan, near Flint, Michigan, Davison, Michigan. But during my experience in high school, I had a great opportunity to be a foreign exchange student and went to the South American country of Chile, where I spent 1 year and really learned my Spanish quite well. But at the same time, I also got exposure to different type of opportunities, different challenges in life, both from the perspective of poverty and development. So seeing a country like Chile that was in its development phase and the challenges it was facing in terms of the environment really inspired me to go on and pursue opportunities in this arena. After high school, I went on to Kalamazoo College, as Dr. Murray suggested, as my introduction from Dr. Smith mentioned. I went on to Kalamazoo College, which is quite near Andrews University in Kalamazoo, Michigan. I studied international relations there broadly, including continuing my work in Spanish, but also really focusing in on political science and economics parts of the world. But I did want to mention, unfortunately, Professor Kudele isn't still on the phone or on the call. I did have a direct connection to Battle Creek, where Andrews is located. I was fortunate enough to receive a grant when I was a senior in college, and Kalamazoo College has all of its students write senior thesis papers, and I used that grant from the Kellogg Corporation out of Battle Creek and went to the country of Costa Rica, where I worked in basically in sociology, anthropology, and focused in on agriculture, which was really not my specialty, but I really wanted to get a better understanding of the reasoning behind a community that was conducting agricultural practices in the highlands of Costa Rica, really difficult terrain, and how they landed there. What were the socioeconomic conditions that drove these people to a really complicated place to farm? And so that just deepened my experience, both in terms of personal connections to the land, to people, and to the Spanish language. So I just wanted to make that quick connection between my experience in Southwestern Michigan and then my future educational experiences. So after Kalamazoo, as was mentioned, I went to Johns Hopkins SAIS University, which is one of the preeminent universities for master's programs for international relations. And I focused in on Latin American studies and economics. And so it really rounded out my background to go on and pursue a career in the foreign service field. And that's what I have done with a number of opportunities. Most closest and dearest to my heart and the most time has been my experience at the Organization of American States, but I also worked for a while at the World Bank and at a couple of nonprofit organizations in the environment space, both Windrock International and the Nature Conservancy, preeminent international nonprofits working in the space of the environment. But now I want to talk a little bit about, the connection between our work at the OAS and sustainable development. Just to get us into that, I wanted to just ask the question, sort of thinking out loud. And most of you on this session today probably have a pretty good understanding of what I'm talking about here. But question being, what is sustainable development? There are a lot of aspects of sustainable development, as many of you know. Going back to mid 2010s, the Sustainable Development Goals were published by the United Nations, and there's 17 what we call SDGs, and these are really the main categories of sustainable development that are established as targets for the countries of the world to tackle, such that we can better secure our planet for its sustainable future. And you'll notice that this is not just in the pure environment space, but it's that true definition of what is sustainable development. Sustainable development, that intersection between social, economic, and environmental development. And so you can see that across the 17 goals, and I wouldn't read all of them, but you see things like reducing poverty, reducing hunger, promoting quality education, really important socioeconomic challenges, but also in the environment space and some of the things we do here. And I'll connect this to our work at the OAS, but things like SDG 6, which is clean water and sanitation, SDG 7 on energy, and continuing on throughout a variety of different SDGs. So associated with each of the Sustainable Development Goals are critical targets that the countries of the world should try to meet in order to secure our planet for the sustainable future. I haven't included a slide on this, but the other major category of global rules setting in the environment space, of course, is the UNFCCC, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. That is the Paris Accord. So the agreements around treating the climate, and the climate treaty, Paris in particular, gives countries a set of binding targets in terms of its climate mitigation and climate adaptation strategies. What does that mean? Well, climate mitigation means mitigating those causes of climate change. So as you all know, climate change is the result of significant emissions of greenhouse gases. So the one we think about most is carbon, which comes primarily from the burning of fossil fuels, but also methane, which is another fuel-related emissions, but it's also related to agricultural systems. As Professor Goodell mentioned, emissions from cattle, the manure that is released, and lots of decomposing materials can release methane. So we're thinking about the mitigation of those emissions to slow down the pace of climate change. The other critical climate change challenge is adaptation. How do we as countries, and thinking now particularly about those of you from places like the Caribbean, how do we address the impending challenges? That is primarily increasing hazards from the growing propensity and strength of hurricanes and other natural storms, and those, how do we adapt ourselves as societies to face the reality of those changes that might also include sea level rise. And so as we think about our future, the climate accord, the Paris Accord, is the principal instrument the countries are focused on in terms of managing climate change mitigation and adaptation. Coming back just for a second, I'm trying to set the stage a little bit for the work that we're doing at the Organization of American States. Wanted to just mention real briefly, since most of us are focused here on Latin America and the Caribbean, I certainly am at the Organization of American States. This is a sort of a stock take, and it's a report from our friends at a UN agency called CEPAL, or ECLAC, based out of Santiago, Chile, where they are taking a look at the various of the 17 SDGs. Where is the hemisphere of Latin America in terms of meeting the targets for 2030? The SDGs are a 2030 target. And so you can see that in a few places, SDGs 2 and 3 and 4, the target is going to be reached, or on track to meet those targets. But many of these, and again, certain aspects within these, there's a lot of sub elements of each of these. There are a lot of aspects where we are not necessarily going to meet the target, but we're trending in the right way, or we're actually moving in the wrong direction. And so that's the bottom gauge, where you can see a number of the sub elements of each of those SDGs. The hemisphere is falling behind and actually meeting the targets. So that being said, and I just again wanted to set the stage for what is the challenge ahead of us. Our challenge is a planet that is under threat from climate change, a planet that is under threat from deforestation, from overconsumption of our natural resources, from the inappropriate disposal of waste, particularly plastics, in our ocean. All of these are major threats to our planet, and all of us have a real important responsibility to address some of these challenges. So an organization like the OAS, where Ambassador Smith and I both work, what are we going to do about that? Just our small part of the challenge. First of all, before I get into the immediate work of the Department of Sustainable Development, let's think a little bit about how an institution like the OAS can do its part to meet some of these challenges. And before doing that, I'd want us to think out loud. What is the Organization of American States? For starters, for those of you that don't know it. First of all, we are the oldest in the world of the international regional organizations. And by that, I mean institutions like the United Nations, the World Bank, and others. Most of those were created after World War II to help the world really bounce back from the disaster that was World War II. On the other hand, the OAS is a inter-American organization that was established first in 1889 and really began to reshape itself in the post-World War II period, and now has the longest history in the international organization space of any. We are an organization that, if you know the OAS, you probably think first and foremost about things like, oops, sorry, let me back that up a second. You probably think mostly about things like democracy, human rights, security. Those are some of the core pillars of the Organization of American States. But in many ways, the pillar of economic development is really essential to the future of success in the Americas. And that would seem obvious, but it's things like encouraging prosperity or trying to address high levels of poverty are really essential tools to ensuring democracy, to preventing human rights violations, to mitigating migration and other challenges that we face as a hemisphere. So within the framework of the pillar that is economic development is where my Department of Sustainable Development is located. So the Department of Sustainable Development, or DSD, is a program that really tries to tackle the critical environmental challenges within
Mark,
the
may I
context of.
stop you for 1 minute,
Yeah, please,
if you
please.
don't mind? And Desmond, I must apologize. There's a permanent council and I need to attend it on behalf of the ASG. I am so sorry I can't stay for the rest of this, but please accept my apologies.
Oh, that's quite all right. Not a problem. We'll catch up later.
Thank you. Mark, I'll see you later as well.
See you, Ambassador. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
So it's interesting, the ambassador is leaving for one of the critical bodies of the OAS. So in the overall framework, the Permanent Council is essentially the governing board within the ambassadors to the organization. And it sets the tone for a lot of the work, and I'll talk about that in a second. So the department, the DSD, we try to tackle a number of the critical challenges associated with the Sustainable Development Goals, not all of them. But you'll see on the screen, and I'll talk about a little more the critical pillars of our program. And what do we do within those? As we are not a financial organization, we are not the World Bank, we're not the Inter-American Development Bank, we don't have big checks to write to help countries solve these problems. What we can do is provide countries with help on policies and regulations, really setting the rules of the game. We can help them build capacity through the exchange of experiences and best practices, undertaking training and other knowledge sharing experiences. And we can work together with other institutions to build cooperation and really support the hemisphere in its efforts to address sustainable development challenges. So really re-asking the same question, how does the Department of Sustainable Development enter the fight for sustainable development? We do it as part of the Inter-American System. The Inter-American System being the group of organizations really trying to tackle democracy and economic development throughout the hemisphere. So those also would include the Inter-American Development Bank, or IDB. It would include the organization called PAHO, the Pan American Health Organization. It would include IICA, the Inter-American Agency for Cooperation in Agriculture. And I wanted to also tie that back to Andrews University program in sustainable agriculture, because our colleagues at EEC are doing a lot of work around the hemisphere, whereas you as a university are training students, young people in sustainable agricultural practices. Our colleagues at EEC are doing the same at a national level. So working throughout the Americas and bringing services, education and capacity building services to countries of the Americas in sustainable agriculture. So there's a lot of connection between the kinds of work you're doing and what we're doing as part of the Inter-American system. And so EECA, PAHO, and these others are really associated organizations of the Organization of American States. So all the programs that I work on together with my colleagues in the department, we often connect with these other institutions that are part of our Inter-American system. We also do a lot of this with other institutions within the OAS, within our larger programs for economic development, of science and technology, cooperation, et cetera, and widely throughout the General Secretariat of the Organization of American States. And as I mentioned earlier, the kinds of services that we are focused on really include policy and institutional capacity building, data, and the like. Notice I'm not saying bringing big bags of money to the region, because that's really not what we do. We help the countries access money, but we don't have buckets of money that we can execute ourselves. As I alluded to a second ago, these are the programs within the economic development realm. And I won't spend much more time on that, but just to say that we try to work carefully with each of the organizations or departments within the OAS. What is the governance? As I mentioned a minute ago, the meeting to which Ambassador Smith is off to is our permanent council. The two standing councils within the OAS include the permanent council, which is really everything but economic development. So I didn't include it on this slide. And then the Council for Integral Development, CD. And so those are the two standing bodies that are for whose membership are the ambassadors to the OAS. And they govern our economic development work broadly. And then within this, the Department of Sustainable Development is supported and responds to the Inter-American Commission for Sustainable Development. And so that Inter-American Commission on Sustainable Development helps us organize ministerial meetings. And so every 3 years, the principal programs at the OAS would have a ministerial meeting. We just concluded our 4th meeting of ministers of environment. It took place in Nassau, the Bahamas. And so it'd be fair to say that at the very highest level, our governance for the Department of Sustainable Development, our work in sustainable development, comes from ministers of the environment coming together and saying to the OAS, we need your help in these areas. And so we gathered ministers for sustainable development, which is really environment, in the Bahamas. And as an outcome of that was issued the Declaration of Nassau, the Bahamas, and the Plan of Action. Based on those inputs, we've really put together our strategic plan. So these are the strategic pillars. Some of this is still in flux, but it's really the strategic pillars of the work that we execute out of the DSD department. And you can see in our vision statement, we're trying to accelerate sustainable development in the Americas through actions that foster greater security, resilience, and inclusiveness. And the sort of memes are about our principal pillars being water, energy, natural disasters, and climate change. And so what I want to do for the remaining time is spend a couple of minutes on each of the 4 core pillars and give you a sense of the kind of work, the way we do it, and what are we trying to achieve in that space. And so I'm starting with water here. Water is actually our largest program within the department. It is really the place where we started a lot of our activities in the regional development space, which is what the department was originally called, regional development. And then it transitioned to sustainable development, as sustainable development itself became sort of a known phrase in the late 1990s. And so this program for water has really over 50 years of experience, many projects it's executed across the hemisphere. We've executed projects with funding from lots of organizations totaling nearly $1 billion of work. It's important to note that in the water space, the work of the OAS is primarily focused on what we call transboundary water resource management. What does that mean? Well, transboundary, of course, is shared boundaries. If you think about the kind of institution that is the OAS, it makes sense that we target transboundary waters. Those would be rivers and aquifers, lakes that share two or more country borders. If there's a problem in a single country, say in Honduras, in a lake or an aquifer that is single country, it's really not in the space of the OAS to come in and do something about it. That's either a national problem, or you would engage a consulting firm to help address that problem. But think about a shared boundary like a river, and the way in which countries on both sides of that river might use or abuse that river. Then the work of the OAS is to set the rules, regulations, and help people understand how to better manage that water resource. And so we do that in a number of different ways. The mechanisms, as I mentioned earlier, primarily through policy dialogue. In our water space, we do a ton of technical cooperation work. So bringing in experts from all over the world to help people understand how to better manage those. And in doing so, our actions would result in in partnerships, in capacity training programs, in better rules and regulations, so that people ultimately are better stewards of those waters. This is, sorry, this one's in Spanish. I didn't get a chance to translate this over. I do a lot of my work in Spanish-speaking countries, but it talks about the kinds of work we do in science and governance and finance. And more importantly, here are the kind of partners we would work with. Think about how do you know where the level of water is falling in a river that is dammed up and is running between two countries? Well, we work with NASA because NASA's satellites can look down on rivers and watersheds and help us better understand the status of a water and whether it's under threats. We would work on financing with organizations like the Inter-American Development Bank. It's sorry about that. Its acronym is BID in Spanish, Banco Interamericano de Desarrollo, but IDB in English. So those are some of the kinds of institutions we would work with in the water space. And this is the last slide, I think, second to last on the water piece, but it's an attempt to give you a sense of the kind of places where we're doing transboundary water work. I might just pick one, like number 9 in South America is the La Plata region, which is really a 5-country aquifer. So waters that flow into a number of rivers in the La Plata aquifer region are coming from and flow through Bolivia and Uruguay, Paraguay, Brazil, and Argentina. And so, it's important for an organization like OAS to help countries understand the importance of that shared watershed and management. And I want to just end the water piece with a quick example of the importance of work like this. So my colleagues in the department, in this case, my colleague Andres Sanchez, who manages our water program, together with our director for legal, Aregui, recently have been working on a program in Dominican Republic and Haiti. It's a great example of what I was talking about, the importance of shared watershed management. There's a river called Masacre, which flows between the two countries. And the country of Haiti was in the process of building a canal that would siphon off much of the water from the Masacre River, such that at the back end of that, the outflow of the river back into Dominican Republic would be nil. And there's a lot of farmers and others who depend on that water. So we're an institution that can come in, be a neutral entity, and help understand how do you better share responsibility around a watershed and make sure that the benefits are accruing to all. I want to move on to another important program, and one that touches down on a lot. Unfortunately, that could be a pun. Touches down a lot in the Caribbean, which is our natural disaster risk management programs. again, we're not an institution that can come in after a disaster with buckets of money and help Dominica or Antigua and Barbuda with rebuilding their infrastructure after a terrible hurricane or remove people with sea level rise change. But what we do focus in on is prevention, what we call resilience, and helping countries build more resilient infrastructure and building natural systems like improving mangroves and the management of forests and others that help the world to protect itself from the threats of climate change. So we really focus in on resilience and risk reduction. But also we're really targeting strengthening knowledge through science and building databases. And I really wanted to emphasize that last point in terms of knowledge and data. And so we're building a platform right now to help the countries of in the Americas with a platform that will help us better understand what kind of threats we are seeing in terms of natural disasters, and how can we better respond when those things happen. Real quickly on our climate programs, we are building a number of programs to help countries better understand their responsibilities under the Climate Accord, under Paris. A couple of us are going to the next COP, the Conference of Parties. This is the annual meeting of delegates from around the world who come together to discuss the rules and regulations around the climate. This year's meeting's in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates, and we're really hopeful that this will further extend the Paris Accord and really bring us closer to a set of rules that really focus in on how do we mitigate the threats from climate change. As many people know, the goal is to maintain a planet with 1.5 degrees Celsius warming. We think we're already about there. And how do we prevent the world's temperatures from going much above that, where we will see more and more threats from the climate around the planet? So, of course, we focus in on those challenges in Latin America and the Caribbean. One of the things we're doing among many services in the climate space, but we're going to be building a regional hub. And that regional hub is going to help the countries of the Americas in better understanding where it can go for sources of finance and capacity building in the climate space. And so this climate hub was a directive that we received out of the most recent ministerial meeting I mentioned earlier. And so we're excited to work with countries of the region and all of our partner organizations to better help the countries understand the availability and access to financial resources to mitigate the challenges of climate change. The last of the programs I want to mention real quickly is in the sustainable energy space. I have a lot of familiarity with this because I spent 15 years managing the sustainable energy program. This slide is just to give you a sense of some of the things we're talking about. For many years, we were really focused in on rural energy services. How do we ensure that the peoples of the Americas have access to electricity as opposed to not mature energy services like using kerosene, like using batteries for lighting, but rather have access to grid connected or household based renewable energy services. The hemisphere has gone to a point where we're over 90% electrified. This is not the case in many developing regions of the world, like Southeast Asia and Africa, where really a lot of rural communities do not have clean energy services. I don't mean just clean, but I mean electricity coming to their households through a grid connected or household based system, rather than using candles and kerosene as their light source or cooking on leña or dung as their principal heat supply. So, this is not a principal challenge we face in Latin America. It's not one of the priorities right now of our organization. What we're really trying to do is focus on cleaner energy services. That would be renewables and energy efficiency, and trying to bring energy services to folks throughout the hemisphere. We're also increasingly targeting electric mobility and clean fuels in the transport space. Real quickly, I just wanted to mention that this program of energy, we call Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas. And in this arena, we organize meetings of the energy ministers. We've had 5 so far around the region, and we're preparing for the next ECPA, Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas, ministerial meeting in March of next year. We'll gather in Dominican Republic to work with energy ministers and help to tackle some of the challenges associated with environmental progress. I'm trying to go quickly to leave some time for questions here. Through the ECPA program, our energy program here, we've worked on a lot of initiatives that include dialogue, sessions like today, lots of programs where we've worked with governments at all different levels to help build capacity, provided technical assistance, and done a lot of work in identifying projects and bringing those projects to fruition with support of our partners throughout the Inter-American system. But Dr. Murray, I'm gonna stop here. I'll stop sharing for a second, and I'm happy to go back to any slide, but to answer questions that may have come up over the remaining time we have today.
Right. Thank you so very much. I know you have a short period of time. My first question is, the United Nations Environment Program, UNEP, specifies that climate change, biodiversity, and pollution are the triple threats globally. It seems to me, and I don't know, I want to get your opinion on this, that loss of biodiversity is not really a huge problem in the OAS, but pollution might be, generally across the 34 member states. And in particular, I wanted to also ask about sargassum. So how does OAS deal with pollution in general and the particular area of sargassum?
Yeah, I guess on the first question, Dr. Murray, I would recharacterize it. It certainly would not suggest that triple threat is not present in the Americas. It absolutely is. The threat of loss of biodiversity is immense in the Americas, and we are tackling it as a subset. And I just didn't mention much of it today, but we're mentioning it as a subset of our other programs, particularly in the climate space. So deforestation as it affects climate change is a really important part of our work. It's also an important part of our work in terms of our water program, because as you can imagine, watersheds, that's the area above and around a river, the removal of biomass, particularly trees, has a dramatic influence on the health of river systems. So absolutely, biodiversity preservation is critical. Pollution is also massively important. Because we work at primarily at a national level and really across multiple countries at a time, we have chosen not to tackle the broad challenge of local pollutants, things like SOx and NOx and particulates, because a lot of that is managed as national programs or as municipal programs, and we don't have as much value add. And there's actually, to be quite honest, there's only so much we can do. We're not a huge program.
Right.
We can't take on everything. Sargassum is, a pun intended, creeping into our space right now. Is part of our water and climate programs. We're adding a focus on oceans, and sargassum will be an important part of what we do. We haven't done too much on it. We've had a couple of important information sessions with sargassum recently, but we haven't really tackled it head on. We're going to do a session with our permanent council in December where we're going to talk about what the OAS can do in the sargassum space. So acknowledge it as a critical program, just don't have a ton of experience in that arena yet.
Okay, all right, so sounds good. We have about 5 more minutes with Mark, so 2 questions really quick. Anybody could unmute and ask your questions. Let's try to get this going here. Mark, Patricia, do you have any questions?
Yes, I do. what message would OAS, for instance, take to COP28, kind of for proposals for what they should concentrate at COP28?
That's a great question. One of the things, Patricia, that we're trying to bring to COP28 is that the countries of the Americas, and by that I mean, you know, Canada, US, and all the way through South America, the Caribbean, the Americas have a number of common threats and challenges. Many people would think, well, the Americas are so diverse in the climate space, or can't come together with a common position. That may be true when it comes to mitigation. You know, a country like the US would say, you know, we have to have binding rules, but, you know, the world depends on our output and we need a lot of electricity and power to, whereas a developing country might have different challenges in terms of its emissions, and countries of the Caribbean are certainly not the cause of climate change. So there's a diversity there, but in terms of the threats we all face, I want to bring a common theme to the COP. That is, we are facing a lot of similar challenges in the impact side. You know, we're all surrounded by water. We face a lot of challenges with growing hazards from climate change, sea level rise, and droughts and the like. So I am trying to really convene the 34 member states with a common message. This is a hemisphere that has not done particularly well in coming together with common messaging in this space, whereas Africa, the Union of African States, have brought their countries together and they come with really a single voice to COP, and same was true with some of the Asian subregions. The island nations under OASIS have come together, but not the Americas. So I'm trying to really bring a common message among all 34 countries.
Okay. So Ambassador Smith had a question that she left with me. It's addressing young people who might want to get into international relations, but I will also add into the whole area of sustainability. What is your, because you were well prepared. I don't know if you were like specifically targeting jobs at the UN and stuff, but from very early on, it seems that you were on track, right, in your education for this particular space.
I mean, honestly, Dr. Murray, I mean, in some ways, I got lucky by having this experience in Chile as a high school exchange student. I was really without a lot of direction in high school as well, and didn't have any clue what I would do with my life. But the exposure to international settings and being around people that are different than you, diversity, really opened my eyes to some of the challenges the world was facing. I also had a passion for the outdoors. So I then really focused my education, didn't even know what I was doing at the time, but basically went down a path that brought me the skills I needed. And I just can't emphasize enough the importance of outside of the classroom experiences. So for me, that was foreign exchange program. It was going on doing a thesis in another country where I got exposure to other people's. It was travel. It was, just filling your life with experiences that expose you to some of these things. And then the last thing I'll mention is really during, after, and between educational experiences, focusing on focusing in on internships, getting hands-on experience with companies and organizations. So I didn't know I was doing it at the time, but yes, I channeled my experiences to make this career possible.
All right. Thank you so very much. I know you told me that you have to go at 10:30. So
yeah, it's been my pleasure, really.
We'll stay in touch. And thanks to everyone else for showing up for Environmental Fridays. And we'll see you next week. Thanks again.
Thanks, Dr. Murray. Have a good day.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Dennis.
Yes. Who am I speaking with on the iPhone?
Millicent.
Millicent. Oh, Millicent. Okay, okay. All right. So we need to talk offline too.
Yes, I just wanted to observe and listen.
All right, sounds good.
Okay, thank you for the invite.
Okay, take care. All the best. All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, that was a good session.
All right, sounds good. Hi, Princess.
Hi, I wish I can't wait for the edited version of it to be out because more people need to hear these sessions every single week. They're so powerful.
All right, we'll talk about it offline too.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Okay, take care.